How's it going, guys? Welcome to the third video in the data cleaning series. So previously I showed us how to clean these two columns. So today we're going to continue from where we left off. Now the next column is the year column, and we can see that some columns are empty according to the column quality indicator here. So what we can do is, depending on your analysis, you can handle this however you want. You can choose to get rid of the nulls, or you can choose to replace them. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove empty rows. That will get rid of all the nulls. Okay, so now we have 100% column quality. Now we'll move out to the type, and this is supposed to be the attack type. So this is the attack type. This is showing the nature of the attack. Now you can see that there are also empty rows here. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace the values with no data. Okay, so I'm just going to replace value to find null, and I'm just going to replace it with no data. Okay, so now we've cleaned that, and basically all these other columns just need to replace the values. So the country column looks okay. Now move over to the area, and we can see that we also have empty rows here. We have nulls, so we can just replace that. Let's go ahead and replace that with no data or no area or whatever you want, but I'm just going to say no data. Okay, and no data, and that gets rid of that. So location, I think location, the same thing. So we're just going to replace values. So we're going to be replacing null, and pay attention, the nulls is in small letter. So if I use capital letter here and say okay, it's not going to replace it. So the nulls are still there. So it's case sensitive. I'm just going to go ahead and go back one step. And I'm going to try that again, but I'm going to use a small letter this time. So I'm just going to say null. I'm going to put no data and say okay. So now I have successfully replaced the nulls or the missing values in these columns. Okay, so now let us go to basically all these columns that have nulls. You can just replace them with anything you want. Okay, and it's not standard practice to forge information or forge data. So if you do not have the data, you cannot do anything about it. You either go back to where you got the data from and ask that the data should be complete, or you just work with what you have. Okay, so in this case, we are working with what we have. So now in this column also, we have empty, empty. So I'm just going to speed through that. Now getting to this column, I noticed something very interesting. So this is supposed to be the gender or the sex, and I noticed that there are nulls, then there's a female, and then there's Power BI is registering two types of males, two M's. So that would cause an issue, because when you try to find out how many gender are in your data sets, you end up with 3 instead of 2. Very funny. Okay, so we're going to try to tackle that, and I'm going to suggest that we do a trim. So let me see if there are any spaces, and I'm going to just trim that, and I'm going to check back to see if okay, that is fixed. So apparently some M's had spaces before them or after them, so but I used the trim to get rid of those spaces. Okay, so as usual, we can just replace the missing values with replace the nulls with no data and click OK. And we move on. Now looking at this age column, some rows actually have wrong information, so we have to handle that accordingly. Now remember what I said about forging data or making up data. We cannot just remove the S from these 20s and just assume that this female here is 20 years old. No, we can't do that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try to eliminate these wrong values. Actually, let's look at the filter and see what happens. Okay, so we have a bunch of wrong data. So we have 18 months, 20s, 28 and 26. So we need to eliminate all these because right now they are wrong and we do not have any idea the right data. So we are working with what we have. Now, a way we can get rid of this is we can, first of all, we can replace nulls. Okay, so let's go ahead and replace the nulls. Actually, let's change it to a whole number data type. Now we can go ahead and replace nulls. So replace values, and I'm going to search for null and replace that with 0. So you need to replace the number data type with a number. Now we're having errors, and the errors would be those other wrong information that could not be converted to whole numbers. So what we can do here is that we're going to go right click here in this column quality check, right click here, and you can see replace errors down here. Now we're going to replace these errors and we're going to say replace errors with 0. I'm going to click OK. Now, a little something about replacing values with 0. For example, if I want to carry out an average, these zeros are going to skew my results. So if in future I plan to carry out an average, I would not need to replace this with 0. I will just leave them as nulls. Okay, so but for the sake of this video, I'm just replacing these values with 0. Okay, so stay tuned for my next video where I show us how I go about cleaning the injury column. Till next time.